In species feeds off of that particular negative energy. Here's the Ted Rice dinosaur story again. Shout out to Stuart. Shout out to Alien Talk at Alien Talk 8281. Fascinated with this channel. The Ted
Uh,
Rice dinosaur story.
a group of us living right around the mobile home where I was living in Shreveport, Louisiana. We were all taken one night, out of sleeping as we were taken out of our bedrooms and put on little I call them sleds, but I don't know, like a board, maybe a surfer's board or something. You stood on it, and there was an operator, a gray, at the end of it, um, who kind of was like operating this board and making it go and carry us out to the UFO that was waiting in a meadow behind the trailer park, which was concealed by a lot of forest and trees. From the mobile homes, you would never know that meadow was back there, but it was, and that's where the UFO set down. And it was probably maybe from my mobile home. It may have been maybe I'm gonna say at the most 500 yards. I don't know if it was even that far, maybe 250, 300. But we were taken out there, a whole bunch of us from several different homes. There were children, there were adults. Uh, we were crowding into the middle of this UFO. And of course, as always, you don't feel anything when you're lifting off or moving. I mean, you don't feel anything. As far as you know, you're just standing still. But where we were taken, how far away from the meadow we were taken, I have absolutely no idea. Uh, and I don't recall anyone else in the group that I talked to about it later that had any recollection of how much time was spent on all this, where we went, or any details like that. But at any rate, after we were taken away in the smaller craft, um, we were taken to a bigger ship, probably, I guess, I'm just guessing, say a mothership. And we were all escorted into this larger area. And it was pretty big inside in the middle. It was kind of like an arena, you might say. It was open, and the adults were then separated from the children, and the adults were placed. And when I say placed, we didn't have much ability to move ourselves. We were kind of being manipulated physically. And I don't know exactly how, but it's like we were taking baby steps, not moving very far. It was hard or difficult for us to actually walk or move our bodies. We were kind of in a limbo state. But at any rate, we were escorted into a little seating area uh, where we could sit on. It reminded me of a tiny little baseball field or football field box where a select group sit with bleachers, like to sit to view the sport taking place out in the arena.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, it was no sport. We were all sitting there. We were separated by a very thick but clear. It seemed to me glass, but I don't know if it was glass or plastic or I don't know what they had, because it was something alien made. But in other words, very clear. We could see through it out into the area there that I was talking about, like an arena. And then very quickly, the children were brought in there. There were several of them. I don't remember exactly, maybe 3 or 4. They were brought out there, and they were told that that Barney was coming to visit them, and there was a fake Barney, like a stuffed animal or something like that, or could have been an alien inside. I don't really know, but it wasn't a real Barney. But at any rate, the children, they didn't have a restriction on their mobility as we adults did. They were still pretty much the way they were normally. But at any rate, they all got excited that they had been brought to see the real Barney. And so they were all kind of bouncing around there, all excited, waiting on Barney to come out. And then Barney came out. And when Barney, the real Barney, came out, the real Barney was a dinosaur, a small dinosaur, and it gnashed its teeth. It was anything but pleasant. The children began to run and scream, and this Barney chased them down. And of course, the parents and we adults sitting there in the bleacher were becoming hysterical at what we were seeing. I actually saw, and God is my witness, I have no reason to misinform you people, but I saw that dinosaur bite off one of the children's heads and swallow it. And one by one, they were all destroyed and half eaten and ripped apart. The adults sitting there were beyond hysterical. And then after that show, we adults were taken into a room like reminded me a little bit of a dental office, the type of chair we were sitting in, and there was maybe I don't know. I'm gonna say 2, 3 different cubicles. It had more than one chair in it. And so we were not all in one big room with all these chairs. It was different chairs, different little rooms with these chairs in them. But in the one I was in, I think there was 3 adults I was in there, and they put some type of contraption. Oh, I don't know how to describe it. I want to say it reminded me of like a little tiny if any of you older people, I know you younger ones probably won't, because the HVAC systems around the world now are so different. But when I was a child, in the basement of our home, there was a great big furnace with a lot of little tubes running out from it that ran all into different parts of the house to heat the house. And this was like a little small contraption like that put on top of our heads, and it had little tubes running off from it. And of course, we were on pause, as I call it, where we couldn't really react or talk or do anything. We were aware of what was happening to us, but we couldn't do anything about it. And so then they turned on and the equipment, and I saw different lights from these tubes begin to absorb like the energy off of us, and I saw different colors, and uh, I realized that that energy I was seeing coming off of us into those tubes had something, or I either somehow knew it, or either they told me, subliminally they may have told me, I don't know, but I knew that the energy had something to do with what we had witnessed had happened to the children. Somehow I just knew that. And I don't remember how long it was we were hooked to to that equipment. Um, I do remember uh, I heard kind of talking or arguments a little bit here and there, like maybe one of the, I remember one man in particular who was one of my neighbors. and I remember him saying out loud, "Stop that." Uh, I heard that, but I didn't see what they were doing to him. But I heard different little things like that coming from different rooms. So I'm not sure exactly uh, what was happening to everybody, but I didn't remember a whole lot after that. Um, I remember that we were all crowded, including the children, back into this smaller UFO that had picked us up, and we were back over the trailer park, but we were way up very high, and all of a sudden the floor we were standing on became invisible. It looked like we're standing on air, and there was nothing under us. And screams let out because people thought we were going to fall. Even I, to this day, have for the first time that happened to me. I have a fear of heights. That's the way it affected me.
Yeah.
I'd never been afraid of heights before. I used to go hiking, uh, and do things.
All right, excellent. So, hello everyone, and welcome to Alien Talk. I'm your host, Stuart, with my co-host Ted Rice. Um, Now, Ted, for people who don't know your story, let's start at the beginning, okay? So let's take people back to the start of Masquerade of Angels. So, when did your contacts first start, Ted?
Actually, they for people who have read my story, uh, it actually began when I was a child. However, I did not know I was having alien visits until I became an adult, and I was involved in a neighborhood abduction, which a group of us were taken at one time. And that was when Carla Turner and Barbara Barthlick became involved in my case. And it was at this point, through the help of these ladies, that I actually recognized that what was going on with me was not angels that I had thought I was being visited with throughout my life, but rather it was UFOs and aliens. And that put a whole different light on everything for me.
And Ted, let's take people back to that abduction experience. Um, can you tell the story again, just for people who might not know your story?
Uh, uh, we're talking about the neighborhood.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what happened was my employer had transferred me from West Texas to Louisiana, and I had been on living in a mobile home because the company I worked for moved me around a bit. So it was easier for me to just have a mobile home. And I had just been moved to Louisiana and had been set up in this mobile home park, and had been there only a few months. And I had started doing some psychic readings at a local metaphysical bookstore. And I had talked with a bunch of people about aliens and UFOs and what have you, and listened to a lot of different opinions, and was uncertain about it all. But I thought at that time that, or I had no reason to think they were not benevolent. Uh, that was my feeling at that time, although I wasn't convinced of it. But moving on with that, uh, I had just been in this particular mobile home spot when uh, we were having several days of rain and stormy weather. It was in April. I believe it was April. And I had been having difficulty sleeping at night, but I thought the angels were bothering me. They were coming at night and touching me, and I felt like I was floating out of my body a few times. And I would wake up frightened, scared, and I couldn't understand why angels were doing this to me. And I kind of had an outburst of anger because my body was becoming exhausted from all of this going on with me. And so I had, in a bout of anger, I had kind of screamed and yelled out to myself, leave me alone, go bother the neighbors, quit bothering me. I need to sleep. I need to rest. And then I think it was that very night that while I was asleep, they came. And there again, I thought it was angels. However,
Now, Ted, what exactly did you see when they came?
okay, I the most vivid thing to me was my bedroom wall opened up like a kaleidoscope. It just separated into a round, kind of shimmering, uh, uh, invisible form there. It was kind of wavy, like you'd see heat rising from a hot highway in the summertime. It was like that, but I could see outside. And then three little figures that I would now say, at that time, I didn't know what to think, but I would now say they were grays from their size and their description of what I saw. Now, I was consciously awake during this time, Stuart. I was not asleep, and they zapped me with something that sort of stunned me, or as I use the expression now, they put me on pause because I was kind of like frozen. I couldn't move.
Yeah.
And then they brought up, it looked like something that reminded me like these beach people used to surf on these beach boards. It was something kind of flat, but they took me through the wall to the outside, which was only, a couple of feet, and put me on this board. And we rode across the drive area and through behind some other mobile homes, and there was a hedgerow of trees, kind of like a thick forest right there. We just kind of went like right through it. And then I remembered being taken into something that there seemed to be something like a light blue force field all around this. And I was aware that other people were being brought uh, in a similar fashion from some of the other mobile homes there. And then I don't remember anything else until after a very long time later that I was under hypnosis with Barbara Barthlick. That's all I can recall at this particular time about that story.
And Ted, you said the beings hit you with some sort of blue light, was it?
Well, yes, it seemed like there from my conscious memory, it seemed like there was a very, very light, almost like a night light on.
Yeah.
And it seemed to kind of have a very light bluish tint to everything.
Yeah. And you didn't happen, was this some kind of device that they were using, or did it emanate from them themselves?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And Ted, when you have an experience like this and then you wake up the following morning, how does that feel? Is it just confusion, or is it you just had this strange dream last night?
Well, I wanted, I tried the next day to remember more of it. I knew that something had happened, uh, but I couldn't detail it. I did remember being taken through the wall. I did remember being taken through this hedge grove. I did remember seeing other people being taken also, but then and I do remember being crowded in like to a small room with these other people.
Yeah.
Uh, but we were somewhat in like a zombie state. We were just kind of
Catatonic.
yeah, so to speak.
Yeah.
Nobody was talking, nobody was moving. We were being manipulated. We were being they were moving us. They were doing to us what they wanted. And I say they, there again, at that point, uh, for lack of knowledge in this field, I thought I was being visited by angels. I didn't know of anything else to call it.
Yeah. And just for people listening, I just want to give an example of the level of control that these beings have. I remember once that Dr. Carla Turner was talking about her own experiences, and they were having these nightly intrusions. Her and her husband were in bed. They heard a strange clicking noise. Both of them were up, alert, looking around, couldn't see anything. She checked the clock. It said 2 a.m. on the clock. They waited a couple of minutes, and then her husband, Elton, said, maybe we should just go back to sleep. And she checked the clock again, and it was 2:45. There's 45 minutes there of missing time. I just wanted to give the listeners an example of the level of control that these beings have, to be able to take two people in their bed while they're up on alert and expecting something is incredible. Now, Ted, you've experienced this level of control as well, haven't you? Particularly with that night that the Greys took you. In your own words, can you describe what that's like?
What it felt like?
Yeah, this other presence pretty much controlling you.
I remember feeling terrified.
Yeah.
I felt helpless. I felt that any control I had been taken away from me, and I didn't know what was going on. I thought the next morning, I even wondered. I had a fleeting moment of wondering if I had died or was dying at that particular time.
Yeah.
But there again, I felt like my brain had been like a computer. It had been put on pause, so I wasn't able to keep thinking independently. It's like everything was frozen.
Yeah. And do you think this is some sort of psychic ability that they have, or it's their technology?
I think it's well, I have certain feelings that I have come about over the years regarding the psychic part of it. But I believe technology is the main ingredient in their ability to perform these things.
Right. Okay.
Now, the something did come to my mind when that I'm afraid I'll lose it if I don't bring this up at this moment. But when you were making reference to Carla Turner and her husband and the missing time, and they heard this clicking noise, that triggered something that I feel like is very important in dealing with situations where people hear the clicking noise. And I have learned over the years that before they enter someone's bedroom or enter their house, they send in little balls that are kind of glowing, and sometimes they're a little bit orange in color.
Yeah.
I have seen them gray. But I've had them come right up within a foot of my face. And over these spheres are little tiny lens all over. And they're constantly taking pictures. And you hear this clicking noise because what it's doing is it's preparing the intruders to when it's safe for them to come in with the least resistance.
Yeah.
Their surveillance cameras actually is what they're doing here. And that has happened to me more than one time. I'm very familiar with that process.
Yeah, right. Now, before this experience happened, you were having spirit guides visit you. I'm trying to think, was it described as spirit guides in your book, or did you use a different name?
Well, here again, I've changed my viewpoint on a lot of this as I worked with Carla Turner and Barbara Barthlick, and we did a lot of hypnotic regressions. My viewpoint on the spirit participation in this, I do believe the spirits are real, and I do believe we can be visited by them, but I do know for a fact that the aliens use this with their own technology to make us think that we're being visited by a loved one so that they can control us better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in other words, they create something like a hologram to make one think that they are actually seeing a spirit. But it's just a gimmick they use to get better control.
Yeah, it's a bit interesting because of the level of control that these beings have, that they would have to use things like this. It almost seems to me that they're afraid of something being figured out, that human beings will figure out how to get past this this control. So they have to use these kind of holograms, these gimmicks as well, to just fully convince the person that what they're seeing is real, when in fact it isn't.
That's very true.
Yeah.
I concur with that.
Ted, when was the first time you met one of these spirit guides?
At this moment, I'm not certain about when. I remember seeing spirits as a teenager.
Yeah.
But I didn't always know who they were.
Yeah.
At that time, family members were not showing themselves to me. And I think the reason they weren't was because I didn't have any training or background in that area, and they weren't sure how to react to it.
Yeah.
But I do remember seeing other spirits that I had no idea who they were. And I remember waking up a few times as a teenager and having entities standing in my room, like at the foot of my bed, and talking to me. And usually the conversation would be very limited. It was telepathic, and they would be saying something to me to get me to relax.
Yeah. It's usually we mean you no harm.
Yeah.
That's usually one of the things they say.
Right.
Or go back to sleep.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about Jill for a little bit, okay? Now, Jill was your friend that you grew up with in Alabama, and the aliens told you that you and Jill were supposed to be together. You were soulmates. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not sure of the details on what they verbally or telepathically communicated to me about Jill. Was we associated at school, but we were not dating. We we didn't really have classes together. I really spent no time with Jill outside of the fact that when I saw her, we always smiled at each other and it was kind of comforting. But there wasn't anything, in my opinion, at that time out of the extraordinary between the two of us until that night that the angel, so to speak, came, took me out of the house, out on to maybe a couple of 100 feet from the house to the edge of the school playground. And there was, there again, at that, I was a teenager, so I didn't realize that it was a UFO. I had no idea until hypnosis with Barbara Barthlick years later. But several of my school classmates, young people my age, were there on board. And they had me and they had Jill inside something like a big tube that was like liquid in it. It's like we were floating inside that tube, and it was kind of lit up. Here again, it was kind of a bluish color again. Everything was kind of a very light bluish color. However, the liquid in the tube was a light greenish color. And I was in one, and I remembered seeing Jill in the other. We recognized each other, but we were separated by the tube, so we weren't touching each other. But this figure that I thought was an angel took something like a tube, a little small tube, like you were going to siphon some liquid out of something, and took some of it out of her tube and siphoned it over into the tube that I was in. And immediately when I began to feel this energy that was passing over into me, immediately I began to have this absolutely very warm, energetic feeling, very loving, very spirited. It was one of the most wonderful feelings I've ever had. And then after this event was over, in days to come, I remembered it. I didn't have to be under hypnosis. I remembered that happened, but I remembered they did not take any of the substance out of my tube and put into hers. Only hers was taken and put into mine. So after that, I developed this insane obsession of love with her.
Right.
And,
so we're talking about more alien manipulation here.
Well, yes. And also for the listeners, and for you, Stuart, in case you're not aware, there is a book called, oh my goodness, I've lost the name of it, The Love Bite. And I think I saw that a while back on Amazon, but they talk about this case of mine in this book, and how other people have come forward that have experienced something similar, in which they developed love obsessions in the very same manner, maybe not 100% identical, but the same format, so to speak. And that's what the Love Bite is about. And why is it done? Why was that done to me? Why didn't Jill receive the same feelings that for me as I felt about her? But it was not there. It was never there.
Right. And why do you think that is? Why was it in their interest to have you experience this love but
Well,
not Jill.
I don't know the answer to that. I have ideas, but I don't know for sure the answer to that. One thing is I suffered emotionally for this for years. This
Yeah.
happened when I was about 14 or 15 years old. And it took me until in my 20s to get past this and let it go. And I suffered emotionally, and it was very difficult at times for me to love somebody so deeply and was not receiving any of that love in return. So I have an idea that it was done to create some type of energy that they were harvesting off of this emotional trauma for me. Now that's where I am today with this.
Okay, yeah. I want to take you back to your grandmother, the very first experience you documented in Masquerade of Angels, where you heard a strange voice at night. When you asked who it was, your grandmother replied, "That was the devil."
Okay, well, what unfolded there was I was only 9.5, 10 years old. The grandmother had come to visit, and we lived in a small house. And so, because of my age, I slept in the bed with my grandmother. And during the night, I remembered lots of loud talking and yelling, and it was very traumatizing for me. I woke up frightened with all of this, but went back to sleep. The very next morning, my grandmother is already up, and she's sitting in the dining room talking to my mother. And I came in from waking up, and I walk in and I go to her and I ask her point blank, and I remember this very clearly, what happened last night if there was all that yelling going on in the bedroom. And she looked at me in shock, like she couldn't believe I was saying this to her. And then she took me in her arms and she hugged me and she said, "Teddy, don't worry about it. I took care of it. It was the devil."
And so your grandmother was most likely an abductee yourself.
Yes.
This was probably going on all her life. And then this being something that's generational, then was passed on to you.
Yes.
So is there anyone else in your family who is currently going through these same experiences?
No, not that I'm aware of. However, I do have some family members who are somewhat psychic.
Right.
I have several family members.
Okay. And how does that come true? Are they just able to, like when you were on your way to that ski resort and you kept seeing the yellow bus? Is it just synchronicities like that?
Well, you're making reference to when I was taken to Sun Valley, Idaho,
Yes,
to the ski resort.
that's right. Yeah.
Okay, the only answer, and Barbara and Carla Turner were in agreement with me. They took me into my own future.
Right. So they were showing you images from your future, and
Well, I was taken. Uh, it was physical for me because I felt it,
yeah,
and I remembered being taken through the walls again, uh, into something that we moved at like faster than the speed of sound. It was like nothing but streaks of light. We were moving so fast. And then that's when I plopped down inside the yellow bus that was traveling into Sun Valley.
right. And so for your family members who are displaying kind of this psychic ability, is this more alien manipulation? Like it isn't really them, but it's them kind of aiding. Or sorry, when I say them, I meant your family members, but it's the aliens making it happen.
Well, uh, from my opinion, where I am today, Stuart,
Yeah.
it was all done for their benefit. They baited me with the excitement of going to this place and making these things happen. As I got aged and got older, these things happen in order to captivate my interest, to move me along to become what they wanted me to become.
Yeah.
So it was not just an at random event that happened because of my psychic ability. In my opinion, they were driving the whole thing to make
Yeah.
it happen.
Yeah. And you've no idea why, like what the end game was.
Well, I think we're doing it today.
Right. Getting the information out there.
That's right. It's been building up to this for years.
Right. Ted, is there anything you want to say at this point about your past experiences right up to that abduction with involving the neighbors? Is there anything else that you feel that's important to say?
Well, at a later time, I will disclose more information that came out about the neighborhood abduction that we learned during the hypnotic regressions. Uh, uh, I'm not at liberty to discuss that at the moment, for simply reason there are other people involved, and I'd like to talk to them first.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. So at a later time, I can share more details on that I learned through Barbara Bartlick and the hypnotic regressions. But I will say this at the point of interest. After that event, I was living in Shreveport, Louisiana, and Barksdale Air Force Base is adjoining Shreveport. It's an extremely large facility. Immediately after this neighborhood abduction, we had in our neighborhood unmarked military Jeeps, Humvees, etc., traveling around our neighborhood day and night.
Right.
Shortly after that, there were two unmarked planes, jet planes from the airport, which you could see them sitting out there on the tarmac at certain times, but they were about the size of DC-10s, and they were unmarked, tinted windows, and these planes flew over our neighborhood day and night until people in that part of the town started complaining. And now this is rumor, but I heard that they actually got the governor of the state of Louisiana involved to stop this military maneuvers or whatever was going on. Of course, Barksdale claimed they knew absolutely nothing about it, as the military is famous for doing.
Yeah.
But I just wanted the listeners to know that this was taking place. So obviously, what happened with this neighborhood abduction, I would say, probably showed up on Barksdale's radar.
Yeah. It's interesting how they know that an abduction event has happened as well. Say, I remember Dr. Carla Turner talking about in her book Taken, a lady called Pat who was 14 years old. They lived in a farmhouse. After an abduction event, these covert men in black, for lack of a better word, showed up the day after the event. And how did they know? It's nearly, there was a man called Phil Schneider and many others who came out saying that there was a treaty between the government and the aliens where the aliens would be able to abduct so many people as long as the government knew exactly who they were abducting. So to me, that kind of lends credence to that theory. But at the same time, these beings can just do whatever they want anyway. I don't see why they would have to form a treaty with governments. It just, there's so much of this that doesn't make sense. But the question is out there. Maybe some listeners want to get in contact with us. How did they know that this abduction event had happened?
But it affected not only myself, but it did affect my neighbors. A couple of neighbors who were involved sold their mobile homes and moved almost immediately. Here again, one neighbor, a gentleman who lived across from me, he was there on a work assignment from California, he and his wife, and he was an educated man. I talked to him at length, but after that night, he was terrified of heights.
Right.
Wouldn't even stand in a chair. He was so terrified of heights.
Okay.
He would wake up in the night screaming that he was going to fall. And now details on that at a later time will come out. But right now, I have to get permission from some of the other people involved before I can reveal this. And I hope everyone understands. I don't want to infringe upon anyone's privacy.
Oh, yeah, of course. I'm sure a lot of people will understand that, Ted.
And then another neighbor that I want to identify was obsessed after that night of taking baths. His wife said she'd wake up 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and he would be in a bathtub soaking and crying.
Okay. Why did Ted?
The point I'm trying to make is some people were traumatized.
Yeah.
By this.
Yeah. It does. A lot of people do experience trauma from this. They don't know what's going on. They can't quite believe it themselves. They can't really tell anyone because people would think they're crazy. There's so many debunkers who come out and say that these people are after fame. But yeah, I'm sure you've heard that, Ted. Have you?
Oh, I have. I've been attacked numerous times, and all I can say to that is, hey, I've been silent for years since Carla Turner died. I haven't tried to get in the limelight. I've avoided it, and the only reason I'm doing it now is because so much more information is coming out now, and I think people need to know more of the truth. I think there's too many loose ends here with everyone about this phenomenon. It needs to all be pulled together and looked at objectively by science, religion, you name it, average citizens, engineers, what have you. It all needs to be pulled together under one umbrella so it begins to make more sense. And I think I can help do that if people will just listen. I'm not asking them to believe everything I tell them. I have no proof of any of it other than sharing with some of the other people that were witnesses to things that happened to me. But nevertheless, you can't just wait on somebody holding a PhD in physics to give you the answers. We all have got to respect each other and start listening to each other from all avenues of this phenomena for it to start making sense.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself, Ted. There's a lot of people. I know there's a lot of debate in the UFO community over certain things, but there's one thing people generally seem to believe is that after the 1940s, something changed, and that's when you started seeing these mass UFO sightings and these mass abductions. Then right up until the 80s, I think it was 1986, where Bud Hopkins found the first case of a woman talking about the hybrid children. Ted, can you comment a little bit on the hybrid children? What do you think is going on there?
Well, I don't. That's hard for me to give my opinion without opening up more questions to things that I'm not ready to answer yet.
Right.
So I want to pass on that at this time, other than I will say that I think a hybrid program with the aliens is in existence, but I'm not sure at this time exactly why that exists.
Yeah. I was listening to the researcher David Jacobs, and he was talking about people who are abducted. There's a high degree that their children would also be abducted, and then their children and their children. And eventually we will get to the point where there's more abductees than non-abductees. From your knowledge, can you tell if this phenomenon has abated at all, or is it still increasing? Ted, I'm not sure if you'll even know this, but year on year, do you know if abductions are increasing or decreasing?
In my personal opinion, I believe that they're increasing.
Yeah, that's what I tend to believe as well. This program, like David Jacobs said, has an end, a start, a middle, and an end.
Well, I will share this with you. A couple of people that the readers would read about in my story in the first few chapters that I have spoken with recently, and two of them have agreed to come on as a guest, and we'll be able to communicate with them later on. It may be a month or two before this can happen, but it would be interesting to get these people's opinion on what they think and what they remember going on with me in the early stages of this.
Oh, excellent.
Well, I will say this: this wasn't in it wasn't in my story.
Okay.
But when I was 9 to 10 years old and the grandmother event happened, it was in that period of when I was that age when we were living at this place. It was a few blocks from our house to a golf course, a very large golf course. And one evening, a friend and I, we were kids, we rode our bicycles. It was a summer evening and it was dark, and we rode our bicycles down to the golf course. We parked the bikes and we climbed over the little knee-high fence that separated the street from the golf course, and we walked out onto one of the greens. And all of a sudden, appearing before me was a triangular shaped object that I would say was shaped like the pyramids. And then on the bottom, it was inverted the same way. So it was both points of the pyramids. It was like they were stuck together in the middle, and it was slightly glowing.
Sort of like a diamond, you could say.
Yes, like like a diamond. That's very good. Now, I don't know if we were abducted at that time, because this was not something that I remembered when Barbara and I were doing all of our intensive regression work. It never came up. It's just something I remembered recently that happened. And so this was probably around 1949 or 50.
Yeah, people in some people in the UFO community would accredit those ships to the Pleiadians. It's exactly the way you described it. This kind of diamond-shaped ship with an orange glow. Now, whether there even are Pleiadians is another story, or if this is just more alien deception. We'll never know. But I like the idea of these kind of, you could say, caretakers of humanity in a way, of kind of looking out for us. But for people, you can see there are videos on YouTube with those ships that Ted just described. So, what's
Well,
our
sure. Let me say this: the friend that was with me had no recall of that.
that?
When I talked to him about what we had seen there on the green that night, he had no recall of it. He was the same age I was,
That's interesting
but
because,
I did remember it.
yeah, that's interesting because,
And what do you tell a 9.5, a 10-year-old little boy of what he just saw?
yeah,
So
uh,
I think I suppressed it and didn't talk about it with anyone because my friend didn't remember. And who would I talk to about it?
no one. There's very few people you can talk to.
So I'm just sharing that because I think that's what's happened to so many people. Uh, it gets put away.
Yeah, yeah. People do think that, oh, I did have a strange experience there, but I'll just carry on with the rest of my day. That was a little bit odd, and I'm sure a lot of people will be able to remember instances like that. Although what you're saying with the fact that he doesn't remember, that kind of suggests to me that there was an abduction event.
Well, I've been curious about that. I wish I had my barber back so I could go under hypnosis. But we lost her, unfortunately, as we did Carla Turner. So,
maybe we should talk a little bit about those deaths in this episode.
Well, Carla and I became very close friends. In fact, she and Barbara actually became the best friends I ever had, because for once in my life I had someone listening to me about what I had been experiencing, and it didn't dismiss me as a lunatic. And it was so wonderful to have that. So wonderful.
Yeah.
And Carla, according to Elton, and I stand corrected, Elton, if you listen to this and I'm wrong, but I believe that Elton had told me at one time that Carla's health had been deteriorating. However, Carla told me that she had become a vegetarian and that she really had to watch her diet to, because she would become anemic, and her health would appear to be failing, and until she corrected that in her diet. But at any rate, where I'm leading to with this is Carla told me that she had been warned about speaking publicly about the things that we were all finding out. And I know I had been threatened after the book came out, but Carla felt that when she was given a diagnosis of this terminal cancer, that they had done something to her that caused this cancer to affect her the way that it did, and so rapidly. She was not convinced that that was totally an accident, that it was just her health failing.
Yeah.
And we talked about it at length. We were close friends. So I listened to her and her concerns and worries and her fears about it. I psychically, I felt that something had been done to her. But there again, being psychic doesn't prove anything. So it did no good for me to agree with her, although I did. I told her that I agreed with that. Now Barbara Barbara and her husband got up on Thanksgiving morning about 4 a.m. and prepared a turkey with all the trimmings to take across town to Barbara's mother, who lived in an assisted living facility. And they were going there to have Thanksgiving with her and spend the day with her. This was on Thanksgiving Day. They left out about 8:30 or 9 o'clock, I think, somewhere around that time. Barbara told me to drive over there, and they were living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the facility of her mother was all the way across town, so it took a little while to get over there. But Barbara said they were not so very far from their home when a vehicle at very high speed, which Barbara said witnesses said it was a black tinted window Humvee with no tag on it, uh, came out of nowhere and hit them at maybe 90 to 100 miles per hour. Their car was accelerated into the air, spinning. Barbara and her husband both were thrown out of the vehicle. The car landed on Barbara's husband, Bob, and he was crushed. He died instantly. And Barbara was sort of trapped between her car door had on her side had opened, and it kind of made like a little tent the way the car had come down over her, and she wasn't crushed. However, she did have multiple broken bones and fractures throughout her body. And it took her months and months and months to recover from this. And a year later, she was coming along better. She wanted very much for me to move to Tulsa where we could continue doing our hypnotic regressions, because Barbara said we had got so very much information from those regressions, and she wanted to do it. But I was living about 500 miles away, and it wasn't easy for me to just, I'd have to sell my home and have to go through a lot of procedure to do that. But I agreed. And at the place where I was employed, I put in for a transfer, and they started that procedure. And then 3 weeks later, they found Barbara unconscious on her floor in her home, and she had had a massive stroke. From what I was told, the stroke happened, it was in like the very back of her head, in the exact place that my grandmother's stroke had occurred. And anyway, Barbara did not recover, and she passed away within just a few days. And so that's what happened there. Of course, I canceled all plans about moving to Tulsa to be closer to do that work.
Yeah. And the aliens here or Men in Black?
Well, at this time, and I it may change with me, but at this time, I don't think the aliens care. They know technology-wise, there's absolutely nothing that we can do about what they do or with us.
Yeah.
We have no way to compete with it. The Men in Black, I don't know about their origin, other than I'm very suspicious that could be a covert operation between our government and a group of aliens. But I don't know that for a fact, and it would be just hypothetical thinking on my part to assume that. But that's kind of the way I feel today, knowing what I know.
Okay, Ted, we are at the hour, so we will end this episode here.
Well, I would like to end with this on all of them. I would like all the audience to be to think about our home, Mother Earth, and we humans are destroying Mother Earth, and she's all we got. And we need to start paying attention to what we're doing, and we need to push big business to clean up their act and the oceans and all of the negative things that we're doing to our planet that eventually is going to wipe us out. But it's going to be too late before we do anything if we don't start paying attention now. So I ask everybody listening, let's all join together and let's take care of Mother Earth.
Right. Right. Until the next episode, Ted. All right.
That it with Masquerade of Angels.
Okay. So siphoning of fluid from your tube. Was that awkward? Was it?
It was awkward with some people, yes. However, most of the participants in the story knew that I had had some sort of bizarre incident that involved them or the close proximity of them in my life at that time. Just as when I was for the people who have read the story, there was a time where an event happened in an old home where I was staying with a friend. And we have incidents involving while I was there in this house with an elderly woman who had owned that property and had passed away. And so most of these people, what I'm saying, they know that I had some type of event happen in my life that where they were involved in some way, if nothing but a listening participant to what I had felt about it or what I told them after it had happened. Maybe a little bit with a couple of people, but most everybody who knew me and had known me for years knew that I was a little odd.
Yeah.
And that I had events happen in my life that were not your ordinary events in most people's lives.
Yeah.
So
Now, when we finished part one, you gave a closing statement of you're talking about concern for the planet. Yeah, everyone needs to look after the planet, and making big corporation responsible for this as well. I just think it was interesting that you chose to finish with that when that's one of the things that the aliens do with the abductees, isn't it? Is this they programmed them to have concern for the planet. Did you notice you did that at the end?
Actually, I hadn't thought about that until you just now brought it up.
So
Thank you.
I just thought that was interesting.
Well, that is a big thing with me. I don't know of anything that irritates me more than to ride down a beautiful highway on the countryside and see beer cans and things and trash where people are riding down the highway, disfiguring our home.
Yeah.
And the earth is our home. It's the only one we've got, and we need to be respectful and take care of her.
Yeah. Now, a couple of people also got in touch with us. They wanted more detail about the grandmother event. For instance, whatever came about with the yelling, what was the yelling in the bedroom? People just wanted us to kind of clarify that over again.
Okay. Yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
The loud voices yelling, actually it was the reptilian beings trying to overtalk my grandmother. They were trying to be loud and angry in her face, to have her cower down and be submissive. And that's my opinion of what it was all about. However, Grandy wasn't intimidated by that at all. She spoke rather loudly right back to them and called them for what they were, and she referred to them as demons. And if you think about it, their behavior was somewhat demonic. Yeah, that's what it was all about.
Yeah.
They were trying to use that as a method of control over her. But it didn't work so well. She didn't lose control until they managed to trick her into taking that aphrodisiac, and then she lost control for a little while after that.
Okay.
Now, as far as her personality, Brandy was in her early 60s. She was not an older woman. She was a country woman, very religious, went to church often, and did a lot of praying.
Yeah.
Uh,
I imagine
so,
this affected her spirituality quite a bit.
pardon?
I imagine being an abductee herself really affected the way she looked at the world and her own spirituality.
Well, yes. The way she reacted to all this was her.
Yeah.
Yes, she saw it all as religious. She saw it all as demons attacking her, after her soul and mine, and she protected me. For her educational level and mentality at that time, that's what it was all about with her.
Yeah. And did she ever say anything to your mother or anyone at all?
Well, the next morning when I went to her, she was sitting at the dining room table having morning coffee with my mother. So my mother overheard the conversation when I asked Grandy what that was all about. My mother remembered that Grandy took me in her arms and loved me and told me not to worry about it. She took care of it, that the devil had come, but that she took care of it and everything was all right.
Yeah, yeah.
My mother had a remembrance of that, but my mother said she never told her in detail anything about it, other than she said it was just like a nightmare experience, and that's all my mother knew.
Yeah, okay.
But I'm not sure that Grandy really knew how to explain it.
Yeah. So we also finished up on in the part one was the death of Carla and Barbara. Ted, how did you end up meeting those two? What led you to go? Was it they who found you or you who found them?
Uh, it was a series of steps. I was living in Shreveport, Louisiana. I was doing a lot of psychic readings in a local metaphysical bookstore. We did a lot of bantering around in that bookstore talking about aliens, and different people believed one way, others believed another way. I straddled the fence. I wasn't sure, but I didn't at that time have any reason to think that they were not okay. I don't know a better way to say it than I didn't know. I didn't think they were uh, out to harm us in any way at that point. And so the neighborhood abduction took place.
Yeah.
I talked about it at the bookstore. People were amazed. I think most people really didn't believe it. Um, at that point, they didn't. Word got around. Some of the neighbors after that went to the media, and there was now I never saw it, I guess for lack of interest, I don't know, but I was told there was an article about it or something in the paper about a scary event in a Shreveport mobile home park, and it didn't give very much information. But at any rate, someone cut that out of the paper and mailed it to Carla Turner. Now, I had never heard of Carla Turner at this time,
Yeah.
but I then received a letter from Carla asking me if I would consider meeting with her to discuss that event.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really know anything in particular about Carla. I was not familiar with Move On, Mutual UFO Network. Uh, I didn't know people working in the UFO community. I didn't know anything at all. It was all new to me. But I agreed to meet with her. Now, Carla did tell me at a later time there was something very unusual about this note that she got in the mail with the clipping of the paper, etc. That it gave her an indication that it was a manipulation or something behind this out of the ordinary. But of course, I didn't send it. I'd never heard of Carla. I didn't know how she got it, but I did to agree to meet with her. So she came to we set up a time, and she came to Shreveport. I think her husband Elton was with her at the time, and we reviewed the whole case on based on what I could remember at that time. Uh, she then wanted to get Barbara Barthlick involved because she felt that there was buried information here within me that would help explain some of this. So that Barbara then was called, and Barbara came and met with me at a later time, and that's how it came about. And then we started working together. We got more and more information. They came and started interviewing my neighbors. We got more information out of that, and they were convinced. Barbara and Carla both were convinced that there was hidden information within all of us that needed to come forth. But none of my neighbors were willing to go under hypnosis. I was the only one, but I still wasn't convinced that anything bad happened. I was quite willing to do it, and that's how it all started, Stuart.
Yeah, and what was your first impressions of them? Were you kind of thinking when you turned up at that meeting, here, this is just nuts. What am I even doing here, you know?
Well, no, I didn't think it was nonsense because I remember too much about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you just remembered, okay, I had this experience that I can't explain. It doesn't fit into the normal human paradigm of what's normal.
Yeah.
But here are these two women who were offering a theory, and when you heard it and went down that route, it made complete sense to you and was just the right move, the right direction to go in with it.
The biggest surprise that came to me after started working with Carla and Barbara, not one time did they ever indicate to me there was anything negative that may have taken place.
Yeah.
They stuck strictly to the facts as I saw them and my neighbors saw them. And it wasn't until I went under hypnosis and when I was doing the regression when I was the 10-year-old boy taken in the cotton fields at my grandmother's farm.
Yeah.
That I started looking at that event under hypnosis, and I became more and more uncomfortable as we went into this. And of course, the readers of Masquerade, they know what happened. I don't want to give everything away until we get to that point. But for those of you who haven't read Masquerade, but all of a sudden, it's like the veil lifted from my brain, and I saw it all for what it really was. And I went into shock. I was screaming, I was yelling. It took 3, maybe 4 people to hold me down because I had become totally hysterical.
Yeah.
Because everything that I believed in shattered.
Yeah. And how old were you at this stage, Ted?
How old was I when we did that regression?
Yeah, roundabout age.
Oh, geez. It was, well, I'm 80 years old this year.
Yeah.
So you do the math. That we did this regression in 1991, I would say.
I'm awful at math.
So I don't know that. Somebody who can think mathematically fast can tell me how old I was.
All right, was it 1991? So 10, 20, 30 years ago, 31 years ago.
Yes.
So
right about that, yes.
Yeah, so you would have been 49. Is that right? So sorry, 39.
That sounds right.
39, sorry. Ted, there was a researcher, John Mack, and a lot of people have heard of John Mack. He was the psychologist at Harvard who got involved in the abduction scene with abductees because he wanted to prove that this was sort of some form of new psychosis that people were suffering from. But he ended up becoming a believer. But he he taped, video recorded one of his hypnosis sessions, but he found that it was so traumatic for people watching it, and it for people who was working with abductees to see the person's reaction as they're reliving the event, that he found it was actually having a negative impact on the abductees he was working with when they viewed it, because their defenses started to go back up. So he had to stop using the tape. Ted, when you were in this under hypnosis, and it's not, Ted, is it more relaxation than hypnosis? How would you describe it?
It wasn't at all what I thought it would be. I thought I would go into something like a trance or something. I didn't know. I knew absolutely nothing about hypnosis. But actually, you're just talked into a very relaxed state.
Yeah.
And if you have the right frame of mind, which I certainly did, I wanted to be cooperative to the regressionist and cooperate. So I was very tuned to everything that she said, and I was wanting to be cooperative and be supportive in what we were doing. So I think that made it made my mind open quicker and better for her. I'm talking about Barbara. She said I was a natural. We put me under hypnosis so many times over the years, till honestly, there were a few times she could do it with me on the telephone with her miles away.
Yeah. And
I never was asleep. I was always fully awake and aware of what was going on. It's just my mind was locked in on her.
Yeah.
And what she was saying,
And do you feel very vulnerable when people see you in that state, the way you're reliving this experience? Could you describe one of, just to give the listeners an example of what we're talking about? When are you placed in a chair, you're regressed, and then you start reliving the experience, and was it traumatic for you? Obviously it was.
Well, I wasn't sitting in a chair the first time. Barbara I was at her house, and she had a room where I always called it her psychiatrist room, because she had a couch there, a great big, very comfortable couch that would be easy to take a nap on. And it was it had plants. It was a very comfortable room. It made you feel relaxed just being in the room. And so that was how we started out. I would get on her sofa, and we would start talking and going into the regression, and we would work to it. Sometimes my mind was cluttered with mundane things of the world, and I couldn't do it. And if I couldn't get to the point where it was going to be useful information, we would just stop, and I'd say, I can't do this today. So it wasn't it was not a deal where I was always receptive and open just because we were there.
Yeah.
There were a number of times when I couldn't do it for different reasons.
One of the debunking theories out there is that you've got Carla, who has a strange experience, and she goes to see Barbara. Barbara puts her under hypnosis, and she sees aliens, okay? And then the same thing happens to you. This debunker was saying that Barbara is actually implanting the memory of aliens into your subconscious, and then you think you're getting abducted.
Well, yeah, that's no different where a man told me one time that the event with my grandmother, that my grandmother was molesting me.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to always have somebody who wasn't involved, doesn't know anything whatsoever, but yet they have some negative, horrible answer to throw in there.
Yeah.
You know, the world is full of people like that, and I have no use for them. You know, all I can do is share what I remember, what I saw, and tell people what I think it means. If that's not okay with some of the listeners, then they don't have to listen.
Yeah.
You know, I mean no harm to anyone, but if the information I have enlightens anyone out there and helps them deal with something that has happened to them, then I'm glad that I could do it.
Yeah. And also, Ted, I know there's experiences that you've had where you've seen aliens that you were never regressed on, and that you were always remembered without the aid of hypnosis.
I remember when I lived in the apartment in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was in bed, I was asleep, and an alien reptile dressed in like robes that a king would wear came through a fog into that room. And I remembered that consciously without having to look under it in hypnosis.
Yeah.
And also, that was another time, one of the most frightening experiences in my life.
Yeah. One of the abilities the aliens have is they can manipulate human memory. There's Carla once said that they would implant screen memories so that when the person is recounting this encounter with the beings, they might have a positive memory, and then but when you dive deeper through hypnosis, you find that what actually happened is completely different usually, and it's your typical abduction experience where a person is taken and medical procedures performed on them. They take either sperm from men or eggs from women, and they didn't have a very positive experience at all. But do you know why you're able to kind of see past these screen memories with the aid of hypnosis?
Well, Barbara helped me. Of course, when I first was going under hypnosis for the very first few times, I ran into a lot of screen memories, and I would talk about things that look quite benevolent.
Yeah.
And of course, Barbara, with the expertise that this lady had, she knew without telling me, you know, that this was probably false memories. But it's like this, Stuart. If they don't cover these negative experiences with something sweet, eventually everybody's going to catch on. This is pretty horrible.
Yeah.
The way they protect themselves is to not let us know what really happened.
Yeah.
Like in the neighborhood abduction, when all of we neighbors were packed into that little small UFO.
Yeah.
The overseer or the caretaker was a female human.
Interesting.
That's what we saw. But under hypnosis, I saw that it was actually one of the tall grays.
The tall grays, yeah.
Tall grays. But they wanted us to see this human figure, and that's what we would remember if we remembered anything, because they don't want us to know the truth. They don't want us to really know what they're doing to us.
Yeah. There's
And another thing, and let me say this in all honesty and sincerity from my heart. I say, if they were on the up and up, they would have landed long time ago, and back in biblical days or whatever, because we have evidence that they were around. Uh, they would have been doing uh, wonderful things in their involvement with humanity.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
fact that they cover everything up with deception and lies, what does that tell you about their character?
Yeah. I always thought like the best thing they could do for us is really just leave us alone. I It's sort of like in Star Trek where they have the prime directive, you know,
Well,
this kind of non interference in
well,
unadvanced cultures.
I understand what you're saying. However, uh, we need to think about the possibility that we are part of this system.
Right.
We are part of it.
Yeah.
And that's the part that we're going to have a hard time accepting, that we are a part of the whole system.
Yeah.
That otherwise they would not be so interested in us.
Yeah, they're very interested in us.
Well, yeah, they are very interested in us. So we are a part of it, but finding the reasons we are a part of it and accepting that reality may be quite difficult for humanity.
Oh, it definitely will when human beings start to discover that we're not the top of the food chain anymore.
Yeah. Well, who knows?
But yeah, maybe we should move on from there. So the Greys, I just want to bring the Greys to people's attention. As my understanding is that there's two different types of Greys. Okay, there's the tall ones and the small ones. There's also people report them in different colors. I don't know if that's other species or if it's just these kind of screen memories that people are remembering. But from what I can tell, and Ted, would you agree that there's two types? There's the tall ones and the small ones.
I have seen both.
Yeah, the small ones are about 4 foot high. The tall ones maybe 6 or 7 feet.
Yeah, somewhere like that. True.
Abductees have described the smaller ones as being more robotic, like artificial intelligence, and they seem to be getting controlled by the taller ones. Is that correct?
Uh, I'm not absolutely sure.
Yeah.
I haven't seen enough to where I could pass judgment on that as to how accurate that would be or not. I know I have seen both, and my feeling is that they are created, manufactured, a cross between some type of insect and human.
Yeah. Okay.
That's just my inner feeling, and I have no reason to dispute that if anyone agrees or disagrees. You know, it's just my feeling.
Yeah, me and Ted aren't saying we have the answers. We're just exploring these issues. Does
Absolutely, I don't want anyone to ever think I hold all the answers, because I
yeah.
certainly do not.
But let us know anyway. Send us an email what your thoughts are, and maybe we can figure this out collectively. Um, Also, if you have any abduction experiences as well, send them to us, and me and Ted will go over them and we might read them out on the podcast and see if we can help you.
Yeah, I had an email from someone last week also that asked me how or why did I stop doing psychic readings? Why did I suddenly put all that away and just kind of became a recluse? And so I want to clarify that. When Masquerade of Angels was released in I think at the end of November 1994, shortly afterwards, I got a very threatening phone call. I had 2 grandchildren, babies practically, living with me at the time. And I got this phone call during the night. The voice was somewhat human mechanical. And what I mean by that is I had listened to some recordings of some spirits that were being channeled through some people here in the United States. And listening closely to that voice, it didn't sound quite normal. It almost sounded a little bit mechanical. And this voice that threatened me called and told me if I valued the safety of my grandchildren, I would put a lip on the information that I had.